In a bustling city, there was a dojo that attracted martial arts enthusiasts from all over. It wasn't just any ordinary gym. It was the kind of place where people came to train hard, push their limits, and sometimes even dream of becoming champions. The walls were covered with framed certificates, trophies gleamed on shelves, and motivational posters reminded everyone to never give up. Among the regulars at this dojo was a man who stood out, someone everyone knew as the champion. This guy wasn't just good at what he did. He was exceptional. He had won countless competitions, earned belts in multiple disciplines, and could perform moves that left spectators in awe. People admired him for his skills, but also whispered about his attitude behind his back. He carried himself like someone who thought he was untouchable, almost like he believed no one else mattered. His confidence bordered on arrogance, and while some respected him for it, others found it hard to warm up to him. One day, the champion decided to visit a smaller community center nearby. This wasn't your typical high-end training facility. It was more of a humble space where locals gathered to practice fitness routines or take self-defense classes. The atmosphere here was different. There weren't shiny trophies lining the walls, nor were there fancy machines humming in the corners. Instead, you'd find mismatched mats on the floor, old punching bags hanging from the ceiling, and a faint smell of cleaning supplies lingering in the air. As soon as the champion walked in, heads turned. Everyone recognized him instantly. Whispers spread quickly among the crowd. "Is that really him?" someone asked. Another replied, "Yeah, I've seen his videos online. He's incredible." Even the instructor stopped mid-sentence during a class to glance over. Clearly, the champion's reputation preceded him, but not everyone was impressed. In fact, one person didn't seem to notice him at all. That person was the janitor. A quiet man in his late 50s, the janitor moved around the room with a slow but steady rhythm, sweeping the floors and tidying up after the members. He wore faded jeans and a plain t-shirt, both slightly worn out from years of use. His hands were calloused, and his face bore lines that hinted at a life filled with hard work. Unlike the rest of the room buzzing with excitement, the janitor remained focused on his task, seemingly oblivious to the commotion caused by the champion's arrival. The champion noticed him too. At first, it was just a passing glance, but then something caught his attention. Maybe it was the way the janitor carried himself, calm, deliberate, almost like he was moving through water. Or maybe it was the fact that the man didn't look up, didn't flinch, didn't do anything to acknowledge the champion's presence. Whatever it was, it irked him. Used to being the center of attention wherever he went, the champion couldn't stand being ignored. He smirked, leaning casually against the wall as he watched the janitor sweep. Then, raising his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, he said, "Hey, buddy, you ever think about learning how to throw a punch? Might come in handy if someone tries to mess with you." A few people chuckled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or stay quiet. Some exchanged glances, wondering if the janitor would respond. But the man kept sweeping, his movements unchanged, as if he hadn't heard a word. The champion wasn't used to being brushed off like that. Normally, people either fawned over him or challenged him, but this indifference, it was new, and it annoyed him. So he pressed further. "What's the matter? Afraid to step onto the mat?" "Don't worry, I won't hurt you much." This time, his tone carried a hint of mockery, and a couple of people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Still, the janitor said nothing. He simply continued sweeping, his broom making soft swishing sounds against the floor. To anyone watching, it might have seemed like he was ignoring the champion out of fear or shyness. But those who looked closer noticed something else, a subtle calmness in his expression, a quiet assurance that suggested he wasn't intimidated in the slightest, unbeknownst to the champion. And most of the people in the room, the janitor wasn't just some ordinary cleaner. Years ago, before settling into this quiet life, he had trained under some of the best martial artists in remote parts of the world. He had learned ancient techniques passed down through generations, methods that emphasized control, patience, and precision over brute strength. Back then, he had been known for his skill, but fame and recognition held little appeal for him. When the time came, he chose to walk away from the spotlight and live a simpler life, content with anonymity. Now, standing in the middle of this crowded room. He had no intention of proving anything to anyone. The champion's words rolled off him like water off a duck's back. He understood that arrogance often masked insecurity, and he saw no reason to fuel it. So, instead of responding, he kept sweeping, letting the champion's ego grow unchecked. Little did anyone know, this moment would set the stage for something unforgettable. The champion's mocking remarks had planted a seed, one that would soon blossom into a lesson neither of them would forget. For now, though, the tension simmered beneath the surface, unnoticed by most but not by everyone. As the evening rolled on, the champion took center stage. The community center had set up a small area with mats where he could demonstrate his skills. People gathered around, eager to see what all the hype was about. Kids sat cross-legged on the floor, their eyes wide with excitement. Adults leaned against the walls, whispering to each other and speculating about what tricks he might pull off. Even the janitor paused his sweeping for a moment, leaning casually against his broom as if taking a break. The champion didn't waste any time. He stepped onto the mat, stretched briefly, and then launched into an impressive display of martial arts techniques. His kicks were fast and powerful, cutting through the air with a sharp whistle. His punches landed with precision, each one accompanied by a grunt that echoed through the room. He incorporated flips and spins, moving so quickly that it was almost hard to follow. Every move was calculated, every strike designed to showcase his dominance. The crowd loved it. Cheers erupted after each flashy combination, and some even clapped along to the rhythm of his movements. "Wow, did you see that?" someone whispered. "Unbelievable," another replied. For a few minutes it felt like a performance, rather than a training session. The champion basked in the attention, feeding off the energy of the audience. He grinned confidently, clearly enjoying himself. But just as the applause reached its peak, something shifted. The champion glanced over at the janitor, who was still standing quietly in the corner. Unlike everyone else, the janitor wasn't cheering or clapping. Instead, he watched with a neutral expression, his arms folded loosely across his chest. There was no awe in his eyes, no admiration, just quiet observation. This got under the champion's skin. Used to being showered with praise, he couldn't stand the idea that someone might not be impressed by his abilities. It was as if the janitor's silence was louder than the cheers of the entire crowd combined. Determined to get a reaction, the champion decided to push things further. "Hey, you," he called out, pointing directly at the janitor. His voice carried across the room, cutting through the lingering applause. "You've been watching this whole time. What do you think?" "Pretty impressive, huh?" The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the janitor, curious to see how he would respond. Some people held their breath, sensing the tension building between the two men. Others exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether this was going to escalate into something more serious. For a long moment, the janitor didn't say anything. He simply stood there, meeting the champion's gaze without flinching. Then, slowly, he shrugged. "Looks okay," he said in a calm, measured tone. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried enough weight to make the champion bristle. "Okay?" The champion repeated, his grin fading slightly. "Just okay. You don't seem too impressed." "I'm not," the janitor replied simply. His words weren't meant to provoke. They were matter-of-fact, but they hit a nerve nonetheless. The champion laughed, though it sounded forced. "Well, maybe you should give it a try yourself. Show us what you've got. Or are you too scared?" Now the atmosphere in the room changed completely. Before it had been lighthearted and fun, but now there was an unmistakable tension in the air. People shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene or stay quiet. No one wanted to see a fight break out, but at the same time, they couldn't deny the intrigue of seeing these two very different men face off. The janitor didn't answer right away. He tilted his head slightly, studying the champion as if trying to decide whether this was worth his time. Finally, he sighed and set his broom aside. Without saying another word, he walked over to the edge of the mat and stepped onto it. The crowd parted to let him through, their eyes glued to him as if expecting something extraordinary to happen. Up close, the contrast between the two men was striking. The champion looked like a warrior, muscles coiled and ready to strike. His stance radiated confidence, his body language daring anyone to challenge him. The janitor, on the other hand, seemed almost relaxed. He didn't adopt any particular fighting pose. Instead, he stood casually, his weight evenly distributed, his hands resting lightly at his sides. There was no aggression in his posture, no sign that he was preparing for a fight. If anything, he looked like he was simply waiting for the champion to make the first move. "Well?" the champion said, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. "What are you waiting for? Let's see what you can do." The janitor nodded once, signaling that he was ready. But unlike the champion, who thrived on showmanship and bravado, the janitor exuded a quiet calmness. It was almost hypnotic, the way he carried himself. The crowd leaned forward, anticipation crackling in the air. Even those who had initially dismissed the idea of a confrontation found themselves unable to look away for a brief moment. The champion hesitated. Something about the janitor's demeanor made him uneasy, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Was it the lack of fear, the complete absence of arrogance? Whatever it was, it unsettled him. Still, he shook it off and reminded himself of who he was, the undefeated champion. How could this unassuming man possibly pose a threat? With a smirk, he lunged forward, aiming a swift kick at the janitor's side. It was a move designed to test his opponent's reflexes, to gauge how skilled or unskilled he really was. But to everyone's surprise, the janitor didn't flinch. Instead, he sidestepped effortlessly, avoiding the attack with ease. The champion stumbled slightly, caught off guard by the simplicity of the dodge. "Not bad," the champion muttered, recovering quickly. He tried again, this time throwing a punch aimed squarely at the janitor's face. Once again, the janitor moved just enough to avoid the blow, his movements smooth and economical. There was no wasted effort, no unnecessary flourishes. It was as if he knew exactly where the champion was going to strike before he even threw the punch. The crowd murmured in amazement. This wasn't what they had expected. The champion, usually so dominant and precise, was struggling to land even. A single hit, frustration began to creep into his expression. He increased the intensity of his attacks, throwing combinations of kicks and punches in rapid succession. Yet no matter what he tried, the janitor remained untouched, dodging and weaving with effortless grace. Finally, the champion grew desperate. With a roar, he charged forward, attempting a powerful takedown. This time, however, the janitor didn't dodge. Instead, he stepped into the attack, using the champion's momentum against him. In one fluid motion, he redirected the force of the charge, sending the champion sprawling onto the mat. There was a collective gasp from the audience. For a moment, no one spoke. The champion lay there, stunned, staring up at the man he had mocked just moments earlier. Slowly, he pushed himself to his feet, his face flushed with embarrassment and disbelief. "Beginner's luck," he muttered, brushing himself off, but deep down, he knew better. This wasn't luck, it was skill, and for the first time in years, the champion felt truly humbled. The champion stood there, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. His face was flushed, not just from the physical exertion, but also from the humiliation of being thrown to the mat so easily. The crowd was eerily quiet now, their earlier cheers replaced by stunned silence. No one had expected this turn of events, not even the champion himself. For years he had been the one in control, the one who inspired awe and fear in equal measure. But now, standing across from a man who had effortlessly dismantled his every move, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Uncertainty. The janitor didn't gloat. He didn't smirk or taunt the way the champion might have done in a similar situation. Instead, he simply stood there, calm and composed, as if nothing unusual had happened. His posture was relaxed, his hands resting lightly at his sides. There was no trace of aggression in his demeanor, only a quiet confidence that seemed almost otherworldly. For a moment, the champion hesitated. Part of him wanted to storm off the mat, to save what little pride he had left. But another part, a deeper, more stubborn part, refused to back down. He couldn't let this end here. Not like this. So, clenching his fists tightly, he straightened up and glared at the janitor. You got lucky, he growled, his voice tinged with frustration. Let's see how you handle this. With that, he launched into another flurry of attacks, faster and more aggressive than before. Kicks flew toward the janitor's ribs, punches aimed for his face, and spinning maneuvers designed to overwhelm. Each strike carried the weight of his anger, his desperation to prove that he was still the better fighter. But no matter how hard he pushed, the outcome remained the same. Every kick missed its mark, every punch landed on empty air. The janitor moved with an almost supernatural fluidity, dodging each attack without breaking a sweat. The champion's frustration mounted with every failed attempt. He began throwing wilder, less calculated moves, abandoning any semblance of strategy in favor of raw power. But instead of intimidating the janitor, these reckless strikes only made him easier to counter. When the champion lunged forward with a powerful roundhouse kick, the janitor sidestepped smoothly and gently redirected the blow, sending the champion stumbling off balance once again. By now, the crowd was completely captivated. They watched in stunned silence, their eyes darting back and forth between the two men. Some leaned forward, their jaws hanging open in disbelief. Others whispered excitedly to their neighbors, trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. It wasn't just the skill of the janitor that amazed them, it was the stark contrast between the two fighters. The champion fought with brute force and showmanship, relying on speed and strength to overpower his opponents. The janitor, on the other hand, fought with precision and economy, using minimal effort to achieve maximum results. It was like watching two entirely different philosophies collide, and the difference was impossible to ignore. Finally, unable to bear the mounting pressure, the champion made one last desperate attempt to regain control. He dropped low, aiming for a takedown, a move that had worked countless times in the past. This time, however, it didn't go as planned. As soon as he grabbed hold of the janitor's legs, the older man reacted with lightning-fast reflexes. In one swift motion, he twisted his body, applying subtle pressure to the champion's arm. Before the champion could react, he found himself locked in a joint hold, his wrist pinned behind his back. Pain shot through his arm, sharp enough to make him wince, but not enough to cause real harm. Instinctively, he tapped the mat twice, signaling his surrender. The janitor released him immediately, stepping back to give him space. The champion staggered to his feet, his face burning with shame. He glanced around the room, meeting the wide-eyed stares of the spectators. Some looked sympathetic, others amused, but none of them offered the validation he craved. For a long moment, no one spoke. The champion stood there, breathing heavily, his mind racing. He had never experienced anything like this before. All his life, he had prided himself on his skills, his strength, his ability to dominate anyone who dared challenge him. Yet here, he was defeated not by brute force, but by something far greater: technique, patience, and humility. Slowly, the janitor extended a hand toward him. At first, the champion hesitated, unsure whether to accept it. Pride warred with gratitude inside him, making it difficult to decide what to do next. But then, swallowing his pride, he reached out and shook the janitor's hand. The grip was firm yet gentle, conveying respect rather than triumph. Strength isn't about overpowering others, the janitor said quietly, his voice carrying just enough for the champion to hear. It's about control, humility, knowing when to fight and when not to. The words hit the champion like a punch to the gut, but not because they hurt. On the contrary, they resonated deeply within him, forcing him to confront truths he had long ignored. For years, he had equated strength with dominance, believing that winning meant crushing your opponent. Now, faced with someone who embodied a completely different philosophy, he realized how narrow-minded he had been. I don't know what to say, the champion admitted, his voice trembling slightly. Thank you. I needed this. The janitor nodded, his expression softening. We all need reminders sometimes, he replied simply. The crowd erupted into applause, breaking the tension that had filled the room moments earlier. People cheered, not because of the spectacle of violence, but because they had witnessed something far more meaningful, a lesson in humility and growth. Even those who had initially doubted the janitor's abilities now looked at him with newfound respect. As for the champion, he bowed deeply to the janitor, acknowledging the wisdom he had been given. It wasn't just a gesture of gratitude, it was a promise to change. Word of the unexpected showdown spread quickly throughout the community center. By the end of the night, videos of the match had already begun circulating online, sparking debates among martial arts enthusiasts. Some praised the janitor's mastery, while others criticized the champion's arrogance. But regardless of opinions, one thing was clear: everyone involved had walked away changed, especially the champion. As the evening drew to a close, the champion lingered in the community center, unwilling to leave just yet. He approached the janitor, who was back to sweeping the floor as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "Hey," the champion said hesitantly. "I know I acted like a jerk earlier. I'm sorry." The janitor paused, leaning on his broom. "Apology accepted," he said with a small smile. "But remember, actions speak louder than words." The champion nodded, determined to prove that he meant it. From that day forward, he started visiting the community center regularly, seeking guidance from the janitor. What began as a clash of egos evolved into a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Together, they worked to teach others the true meaning of strength, not just in terms of physical prowess, but in character, discipline, and humility. And though the champion would never fully match the janitor's level of mastery, he embraced the journey, knowing that growth was more important than perfection. Little did he know this experience would become a turning point in his life, one that would inspire countless others to look beyond appearances and embrace the wisdom hidden in unlikely places. The days following the unexpected showdown at the community center marked the beginning of a transformation, not just for the champion, but for everyone who had witnessed it. The video of the match continued to spread online, sparking conversations and debates across social media platforms. Some praised the janitor's calm demeanor and impeccable technique, while others criticized the champion's arrogance, though many acknowledged his willingness to learn from the experience. The incident became more than just a viral moment. It turned into a story about humility, growth, and the importance of looking beyond appearances. For the champion, life took on a new rhythm. He started showing up regularly at the community center, no longer as the boastful figure people once knew, but as someone eager to improve, not just in martial arts, but as a person. At first, the change was subtle. He would sit quietly in the corner during classes, observing how the janitor taught self-defense techniques to beginners. The lessons weren't flashy or dramatic like the high-energy demonstrations he was used to. Instead, they focused on fundamentals: balance, control, patience. These were concepts the champion thought he understood, but now realized he had only scratched the surface of. One evening, after most of the participants had left, the champion approached the janitor. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his tone cautious but sincere. "Sure," the janitor replied, setting aside the mop he'd been using to clean the floor. "I've been thinking, why didn't you say anything when I mocked you that day? Most people would have snapped back or walked away, but you just kept sweeping." The janitor chuckled softly, leaning against the handle of the mop. "Because your words didn't matter," he said simply. "They didn't define me, so why let them bother me? Besides, I could see you were trying to provoke a reaction. Sometimes silence says more than any comeback ever could." The champion nodded slowly, absorbing the wisdom behind those words. It was a lesson he hadn't expected, but one that resonated deeply. Growing up, he had always equated confidence with dominance, believing that proving himself meant asserting superiority over others. Now faced with someone who embodied quiet strength, he began to understand that true confidence came from within. It wasn't dependent on external validation. Over time, the champion became a regular fixture at the community center. He helped out where he could, whether it was assisting with classes, organizing equipment, or even cleaning up after sessions. It wasn't easy for him to step out of his comfort zone. For years, he had been accustomed to being treated like a celebrity, receiving admiration and respect without having to earn it. Doing menial tasks felt strange at first, almost beneath him. But as weeks passed, he found satisfaction in contributing to something bigger than himself. Sweeping floors or wiping down mats might not have seemed glamorous, but they reminded him of an important truth. Every role mattered. No matter how small it appeared, the bond between the champion and the janitor grew stronger with each passing day. Their relationship evolved from teacher and student to something resembling friendship. They spent hours talking not just about martial arts, but about life, struggles, and the lessons they had learned along the way. The janitor shared stories from his past, recounting the years he had spent training in remote monasteries under masters who emphasized discipline over fame. "I chose this life because it brought me peace," he explained one evening. "Not everyone needs to chase recognition. Sometimes the greatest victories are the ones nobody sees." These conversations left a lasting impact on the champion. He began to reflect on his own journey, questioning the motivations that had driven him for so long. Had he pursued martial arts out of passion, or had he been chasing trophies and applause? The answers weren't always comfortable, but they pushed him to dig deeper, to rediscover what truly mattered to him. As word spread about the champion's transformation, more people started attending the community center's workshops. Parents brought their children, hoping they would learn not just self-defense, but values like respect, perseverance, and humility. Adults joined too, seeking guidance on how to handle conflicts in their daily lives. Together, the champion and the janitor developed a program tailored to different age groups, blending physical training with philosophical teachings. One of the key principles they emphasized was the idea of fighting without fighting. This concept puzzled many newcomers at first. How could you defend yourself without engaging in combat? Through practical examples and exercises, the janitor demonstrated that de-escalation often required more skill than aggression. By staying calm and composed, you could neutralize a situation before it escalated. The champion, drawing from his own experiences, added his perspective. "I used to think strength was about overpowering others," he told a group of teenagers during one session. "But real strength is knowing when to walk away and when to stand your ground." The workshops quickly gained popularity, attracting participants from all walks of life. Some came for fitness, others for self-confidence, and a few simply out of curiosity. Regardless of their reasons, everyone left with something valuable, whether it was a new technique, a fresh perspective, or renewed motivation to face challenges. Head-on. Despite the growing attention, the janitor remained unchanged. He continued his routine of sweeping floors and maintaining the space, treating everyone with the same kindness and respect. To him, teaching wasn't about gaining followers or building a reputation. It was about sharing knowledge and empowering others. His humility inspired those around him, including the champion, who often marveled at how effortlessly the older man commanded respect without demanding it. One afternoon, as the two men sat together after a particularly lively class, the champion looked at the janitor and said, "You know, I never thanked you properly for everything you've done for me." The janitor raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "You showed me what it means to be strong, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. You taught me to value things I didn't even realize I needed: patience, humility, connection. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for you." The janitor smiled faintly, shaking his head. "You did the hard work yourself. All I did was point you in the right direction. Remember, growth comes from within. You have to want it for yourself." The champion nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but for the first time in years, he felt grounded. He had found purpose not in accolades or titles, but in helping others find their own strength. By embracing humility and learning from someone he had once underestimated, the champion had transformed not just his approach to martial arts, but his entire outlook on life. And though the journey was far from over, he knew he was moving in the right direction, one step, one lesson, one moment at a time. Months had passed since the day the champion and the janitor first faced off on the mat. The community center, once a quiet spot known only to locals, had transformed into a hub of activity. People from all over the city began showing up, some curious about the viral video they'd seen online. Others drawn by word-of-mouth stories of the unique lessons taught there. What started as a small martial arts program grew into something much larger, a movement focused not just on physical fitness, but on personal growth, resilience, and connection. The champion played a big role in this transformation. Gone was the cocky figure who strutted onto the mat with arrogance in his eyes. In his place stood someone humbler, more grounded, and deeply committed to giving back. He still carried himself with confidence, but it was a quieter kind of confidence, the kind that came from knowing he didn't have all the answers and being okay with that. Every class he taught reflected this shift. Instead of flashy moves designed to impress, he emphasized fundamentals, balance, focus, and control. Martial arts isn't just about winning fights, he often told his students. It's about learning how to handle yourself physically, mentally, emotionally. Life will knock you down sometimes. It's not about avoiding those moments. It's about getting back up. His words resonated with people because they were authentic. He wasn't reciting lines from a textbook or repeating advice he'd heard somewhere else. These were lessons he had lived through, struggles he had faced, and mistakes he had learned from. When he talked about humility, people listened not because he was perfect, but because they could see how far he had come. The janitor, meanwhile, remained the heart and soul of the community center. While the champion took on more responsibilities, teaching classes and organizing events, the janitor stuck to what he did best, maintaining the space and offering guidance whenever needed. He never sought the spotlight, yet his presence was felt everywhere. Whether it was helping a nervous beginner find their footing or reminding an advanced student to slow down and focus on technique, he had a way of making everyone feel valued. One evening, after a particularly busy day at the center, the two men sat together in the corner of the room. The mats were rolled up, the equipment put away, and the hum of conversation had faded into silence. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the floor. For a while, neither of them spoke. They simply enjoyed the quiet, each lost in their thoughts. Finally, the champion broke the silence. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" he asked, his voice soft. The janitor glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. "Different? How? I don't know. What if I hadn't challenged you that day? Or what if I had walked away after losing instead of sticking around? Things might have turned out completely differently for both of us." The janitor smiled faintly, leaning back against the wall. "Life doesn't work like that," he said. "You can't spend too much time thinking about what-ifs. All we have is the present moment. Everything else is just noise." The champion nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. He knew the janitor was right. Still, it was hard not to marvel at how one simple encounter had set off a chain reaction, changing not just his life, but the lives of so many others. Over time, the community center became more than just a place to train. It became a second home for many. Kids who had struggled with bullying found strength and courage here. Adults dealing with stress or self-doubt discovered tools to navigate life's challenges. Even seniors joined in, participating in low-impact exercises and meditation sessions, tailored to their needs. Everyone brought something unique to the table, and in return, they left with something equally valuable. The workshops evolved too. Alongside martial arts training, the champion and the janitor introduced discussions on topics like conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, and goal setting. These sessions weren't mandatory, but they quickly became popular. Participants appreciated the holistic approach, recognizing that true strength extended beyond physical ability. One teenage girl summed it up perfectly during a feedback session. "This place isn't just about fighting, it's about becoming better versions of ourselves." As the months turned into years, the bond between the champion and the janitor deepened even further. Though their personalities couldn't have been more different, one outgoing and energetic, the other calm and reserved, they complemented each other in ways neither had anticipated. Where the champion excelled at inspiring excitement and enthusiasm, the janitor provided stability and wisdom. Together, they created a dynamic that benefited everyone around them. One crisp autumn morning, The community center hosted its annual open house event. Families streamed in, eager to explore the facilities and meet the instructors. Children ran around, testing out the punching bags and practicing kicks under the watchful eyes of volunteers. Parents chatted with one another, sharing stories of how the center had impacted their lives. In the main hall, the champion stood at the front of the room, addressing the crowd. "Welcome, everyone," he began, his voice warm and inviting. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm someone who used to think I had everything figured out. I thought strength meant dominance and success meant recognition. But then I met someone who showed me otherwise." He gestured toward the janitor, who was standing quietly near the back of the room. "Thanks to him, and to all of you, I've learned that real strength comes from humility, patience, and the willingness to grow." The audience erupted into applause, cheering not just for the champion, but for the message he represented. As the clapping died down, the janitor stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "I won't take up too much of your time," he said, his voice carrying clearly despite its softness. "But I want to remind everyone of something important. Strength isn't something you achieve overnight. It's built gradually through effort, persistence, and support from those around you. None of us are alone in this journey. We're all here to lift each other up." By the end of the event, dozens of new members had signed up for classes, inspired by the stories they'd heard and the energy they'd experienced. The champion and the janitor watched as families left, chatting excitedly about what they planned to learn next. There was a sense of fulfillment in the air, a shared understanding that this was more than just a martial arts school. It was a community rooted in mutual respect and growth. Years later, when the champion looked back on his life, he realized how much had changed since that fateful day on the mat. He had gone from someone defined by ego to someone driven by purpose. The trophies and belts he had once treasured now gathered dust in a closet, replaced by memories of the people he had helped along the way. And while he still trained regularly, pushing himself to improve, he no longer measured success by external achievements. Instead, he found joy in seeing others succeed, in watching timid beginners transform into confident fighters, in hearing parents thank him for helping their children gain self-esteem, and in knowing he had played a part in building something meaningful. The janitor, for his part, continued doing what he loved most, supporting others without seeking recognition. His legacy wasn't written in awards or headlines, but in the countless lives he touched through his quiet dedication. To the champion and to everyone else, he was a reminder that true greatness lies not in standing above others, but in lifting them higher. And so, the story of the champion and the janitor became legend, a testament to the power of humility, growth, and human connection. It served as a reminder that strength isn't about overpowering others, but about overcoming ourselves. Through their partnership, they proved that even the unlikeliest encounters could lead to profound change, inspiring generations to look beyond appearances and embrace the wisdom hidden in unlikely places.